China is home to some of the largest and busiest high-speed railway networks in the world, spanning thousands and thousands of kilometers and connecting big cities to sleepy towns alike. But it wasn't always like this. It was a country once plagued by winding, dirty roads and slow-moving trains, struggling to provide affordable and convenient transportation for its over 1 billion citizens. Then, in the late 2000s, driven by a vision of modernization and economic growth, the Chinese government decided to invest billions of dollars into expanding and improving its railway network. This colossal effort transformed China's transportation landscape not only as a marvel of modern engineering, but also as a symbol of the nation's economic prowess and ambition. With massive funding and government support, it didn't take long for its high-speed rail network to surpass the total length of all other countries combined. China's high-speed rail network currently stretches an impressive 70,000 kilometers, dwarfing that of Japan, one of the countries in Asia to introduce bullet trains, which only has 3,000 kilometers of high-speed rail tracks. Sleek and swift trains glide through the picturesque countryside at speeds exceeding 300 kilometers per hour, seamlessly connecting bustling cities and remote towns alike. At the heart of this achievement lies a complex web of technology known as the Chinese Train Control System, or CTCS2. This sophisticated array of sensors and signals is designed to prevent disasters like a collision when two or more trains occupy the same track simultaneously. Using a combination of track circuits and balances, the CTCS2 relays critical information to the train's onboard computer, ensuring a smooth and safe journey. In theory, it's an effective safeguard, a state-of-the-art technology known for its reliability and accuracy. But on a fateful evening in 2011, this high-tech network faced its ultimate test. It was July 23rd, an ordinary day for the drivers, conductors, and passengers riding China's high-speed trains on the Yong-Tai-Wen railway line just south of Shanghai. Despite the bad weather with heavy rains, lightning, and thunderstorms, operations continued as usual. As night fell, Train D301 en route from Hangzhou to Fuzhou, suddenly came to a stop over a viaduct near the Wu River. Inside the train cars, the passengers stirred, some waking from their slumber, puzzled by the sudden halt. But little did they know that disaster was hurtling toward them at nearly 100 kilometers per hour. Behind them, another high-speed train, D301, was running its course. Transporting nearly 600 passengers from Beijing South to Fuzhou, its drivers and conductors were completely unaware of the train that stopped on the tracks ahead. In mere minutes, the train from Beijing slammed into the stationary train from Hangzhou, with the force of the impact derailing the coaches and sending them plummeting off the 10-story-high viaduct. The 2011 Wenzhou train collision was a devastating catastrophe, instantly killing 40 passengers and injuring dozens more, making it the deadliest high-speed train disaster in history. From One Up Media, this is Mass Murders. After years of political turmoil, disasters, famine, and widespread poverty, China emerged in the late 2010s as the second-largest economy in the world. And the perfect representation of its rapid growth and development is none other than its high-speed rail network. China's high-speed rail, or HSR, is a massive modern engineering achievement. It spans around 40,000 kilometers, equivalent to the distance covered by 4 direct flights between London and Singapore, making it the largest in the world. The vast network of bullet trains, constantly zooming in and out of China's provinces, cities, and towns, can facilitate nearly 2 billion rides in a single year, But supervising and managing this dizzying network of high-speed trains in such a vast country is a formidable task, especially when the lives of thousands of passengers are at stake. To ensure safety, Chinese engineers and officials turned to cutting-edge technology. So they introduced the Chinese Train Control System, or CTCS-2, an advanced network of balises and track circuits that keep trains and control centers in constant communication. Balises are small and flat sensor devices usually placed in the middle of the rail tracks, and they are responsible for sending critical information to the computer on board the train, providing real-time updates on track conditions, speed limits, and other essential instructions that help ensure safe and efficient travel. Track circuits, on the other hand, are installed to detect a train's presence on a specific section of track. When a train enters a track circuit, it completes an electrical circuit, signaling its position to the control center. This information is then used to manage train movements, ensuring safe distances and preventing collisions. When Chinese authorities introduced CTCS-2, they lauded it as another technological triumph. Designed with multiple fail-safes, it was intended to prevent accidents on the world's fastest railway network. But even the most sophisticated systems faced challenges. While officials were proud of the precision, accuracy, and multiple layers of fail-safes found in the CTCS-2 feature, they overlooked one crucial detail. In what seemed a hurried bid to showcase its advanced capabilities to the world, engineers and authorities failed to address the vulnerabilities of CTCS-2 from systemic risks, like the unpredictability of nature and weather. The high-speed rail network in China isn't just about the rail tracks. It's also about the bullet trains that have become symbols of innovation. These trains, known for their speed, were sourced from various parts of the world, especially from countries like Europe and Japan, where high-speed rail is a well-established mode of transportation. And the two trains involved in the 2011 Wenzhou collision were no exception, as these trains were highly regarded as products of international collaboration and cutting-edge technology. The train that traveled from the capital Beijing to Fuzhou on that tragic day was one of the top models in China's high-speed rail fleet. The train was named the D301, and it was based on the Japanese E2 series Shinkansen, famous for its sleek design and its capacity to zoom at speeds of up to 250 kilometers per hour. And with some modifications, they could even hit 300 kilometers per hour. Meanwhile, the other train, called the D3115, came from the Swedish Bombardier Regina series in Europe. It was part of the first generation of China's high-speed rail system, known as the D trains, and like its Japanese counterpart, it was built for high-speed travel, moving passengers at 250 kilometers per hour. But these bullet trains didn't just make land travel faster and safer, they also made it more convenient and comfortable. They were marketed as a way to provide a smooth and efficient travel experience. With high-speed trains, passengers could skip the long queues at airports and simply board the nearest train at the closest station. But even the most advanced inventions can fail, especially when unpredictable factors such as human errors, miscommunication, and even bad weather, such as thunderstorms, come into play. Every July, many parts of China experience a mix of hot, humid weather and intense thunderstorms, often accompanied by heavy downpours. During this season, the country braces for the East Asian monsoon, characterized by heavy rainfall in the southern and eastern regions, while other areas, like the north, can remain dry and warm. This diverse climate means that while some areas endure extreme heat, others face heavy rain and potential flooding. And this combination of heat, humidity, and rain makes July one of the wettest and hottest months in China, significantly impacting travel and daily activities. For example, intense rainfall in southern China in July can result in extreme flooding in low-lying areas, including major highways, and can ultimately paralyze public transportation. It was around 8 p.m. on July 23, 2011. The summer air was thick with humidity as rain poured down in the city of Wenzhou, China. On the Yong-Tai-Wen railway line, two high-speed trains bound for the city of Fuzhou in Fujian province were carrying hundreds of passengers on what should have been routine journeys. One train departed from the nearby city of Hangzhou in Zhejiang, the province that borders Fujian in the north. It was carrying over 1,000 passengers, including families, business travelers, and tourists. At that time, some of the travelers were already dozing off, while others were engaged in quiet conversations or reading books. Meanwhile, the other train traveling on the same line came all the way from the northern part of China, in particular, the capital city of Beijing. It had nearly 600 passengers on board, all looking forward to reaching their destination. The sleek and modern train sped through the night, with its passengers enjoying the smooth ride and the amenities provided on board. At that time, they were just 2 hours away from their destination of Fuzhou City, and it would have been just a routine journey until the train suddenly came to a screeching halt. The bullet train, speeding down around 100 kilometers per hour, came to a stop near the viaduct in Wu River. The motion jolted passengers from their seats, and a wave of confusion and concern spread through the carriages. Several curious passengers peered through the windows, illuminated by flashes of lightning. Meanwhile, another train was hurtling toward them on the same track at high speed, but no one seated in the cabins of either train knew they were about to collide. As the train from Beijing continued to speed towards the viaduct, the driver and conductor monitored their computer system, ensuring they received all updates and communications from the CTCS-2 system. But with each passing second, the distance between the two trains closed, and the sense of impending doom grew. After scanning his computer screen, the driver looked up and gazed through the window into the rainy night. Then, something caught his eye. He narrowed his eyes to get a clearer view. At first, he thought they were just distant lights from the tracks up ahead, but much to his shock, it was the tail end of another train that had come to a stop in the middle of the railway. Alarmed, he immediately pressed the emergency stop button, but it was too late. Train D301 was speeding down the Yong-Tai-Wen railway line at a speed of close to 100 kilometers per hour, and at 8:27 p.m., it slammed into the rear of Train D301. The impact was catastrophic, with 6 carriages derailed and plummeting 10 stories to the ground below, filling the night with the groaning sounds of tearing metal and shattering glass. Inside the derailed carriages, chaos erupted. Passengers were thrown from their seats, jolted awake by the impact, struggling to comprehend what had just happened. Luggage flew through the air, and the once orderly train cars became scenes of utter devastation. The air was thick with dust and the acrid smell of burning, making it hard to breathe. Cries for help and the moans of the injured filled the darkness, a stark contrast to the silence that had preceded the disaster. Some passengers were trapped under debris, unable to move, while others stumbled through the wreckage, disoriented and in shock. Many began crawling out of the derailed cars, desperate to escape the nightmare. The night was pierced by the blaring sirens of ambulances and the urgent shouts of rescue workers, battling both the inclement weather and the chaos. Heavy rain continued to pour, complicating their efforts as they navigated through the wreckage of derailed carriages scattered around the viaduct. Rescue teams confronted a nightmarish scene: twisted metal, shattered glass, and debris scattered everywhere, with what appeared to be dead bodies strewn across the area. The ground was slick with a gruesome mixture of rainwater, blood, and grime, making each step perilous. Equipped with flashlights and cutting tools, the rescue personnel navigated the wreckage with extreme caution, desperately trying to locate survivors trapped inside the mangled train cars. The air was thick with the acrid smell of burning materials and the sounds of anguished cries, adding to the harrowing atmosphere of the disaster site. As dawn broke, news of the collision spread quickly, and relatives and friends of the passengers in the two ill-fated high-speed trains rushed to Wenzhou to find out what had happened. In the aftermath of the catastrophe, confusion and uncertainty reigned. The victims, their relatives, and the public demanded answers. It was close to midnight when the grim news of a fatal train collision in the suburbs of Wenzhou City broke. The world watched in horror as images of mangled train cars and frantic rescue efforts flooded the media. Initial reports were chaotic and confusing, but one fact stood out amidst the confusion. A disaster of unprecedented scale had struck. Within minutes, rescue operations were launched in full force. Over 1,000 rescue workers and volunteers were activated to save those trapped in the wreckage, driven by the Chinese government's order for what was described as an all-out rescue effort. Those that were deployed were quickly split into two groups, one stationed on the viaduct where the collision had occurred, and the other working on the ground below, where the carriages had plummeted. The urgency was palpable as rescuers used cutting torches, cranes, and even their bare hands to pull survivors from the twisted remains of the trains. Those fortunate enough to escape with only cuts and bruises were quickly pulled out of the wreckage and tended to by medics, while others were carried out on gurneys, their bodies covered with white sheets. While the victims in the crash were pulled out one by one, medics had to set up improvised triage areas near the disaster site to tend to the injured. By this time, families and friends of the victims had also anxiously gathered around, desperately waiting for any news about their loved ones who had boarded the ill-fated trains. However, their hopes were nearly extinguished when officials, armed with heavy equipment and machinery, made an extremely controversial announcement. Officials from the Chinese government had announced plans to put a pause on the rescue operations and begin burying the wrecked trains into the ground instead. The railway ministry justified this decision by claiming that the trains contained extremely valuable technology. They argued that if this technology fell into the wrong hands, it was at risk of being stolen and potentially misused. They also emphasized that the technology found in the trains was classified as national level, and it represented significant advancements and proprietary information, which could compromise national security and competitive advantage if exposed. Naturally, this decision was met with widespread dismay, particularly among those who had been anxiously waiting for hours for updates about the passengers. The Chinese media was also particularly skeptical about the decision to bury the trains. During a press conference, Wang Yongping, the spokesman for the railway ministry, stated that the burial was intended to facilitate the rescue work. He argued that clearing the wreckage from the site more quickly would allow rescuers better access to trapped survivors and reduce the risk of further accidents from the damaged trains. This explanation was met with outroar and disbelief from journalists, and in response to the skepticism, Wang addressed a journalist directly, saying, "Whether or not you believe this explanation, I believe it." Despite directives from the publicity department, Chinese media, both independent and state-owned, openly criticized the Ministry of Railways and expressed skepticism towards the government. It's important to note that in China, where it is well known that the government controls the media, any attempts to directly challenge official narratives were considered extremely bold and rare, especially on state-owned television programs. However, the challenges and arguments persisted. In one instance, A news anchor on China Central Television retorted, "The technology in the trains may be advanced, but is your management advanced? Is your respect for people advanced? At the end of the day, is your overall operational capability advanced?" Another example came from a program on one of China's most popular networks called CCTV. The channel aired a program that was extremely critical of Chinese society, particularly focusing on the blistering pace of China's economic growth. The host said, "If nobody can be safe, do we still want this speed of growth? Can we drink a glass of milk that's safe? Can we stay in an apartment that will not fall apart? Can we travel in safe trains? And if a major accident does happen, can we not be in a hurry to bury the trains? China, please slow down. If you're too fast, you may leave the souls of your people behind." At this stage of the rescue efforts, workers had accounted for only a few of the over 1,000 passengers on the two trains, with many believing that dozens more remained trapped inside the wreckage, awaiting rescue from their horrendous ordeal. The situation was further aggravated by the Ministry of Railways' attempt to resume services on the Yong-Tai-Wen line, despite ongoing rescue operations and investigations at the disaster site, enraging the public even more. These decisions were widely seen as insensitive and hasty, fueling fears of a cover-up that would ultimately prevent justice from being served. Among those who were protesting the abrupt halt in rescue operations were local police officers who were guarding the site of the accident, who insisted to officials that more lives could be saved if the search and rescue efforts continued. Fortunately, their pleas were heard, because 21 hours after the collision, a miracle happened. Rescuers found a 2-year-old girl named Jiang Wei-yi alive, despite being trapped for hours under tons of debris. Covered in dust and visibly shaken, she was gently pulled from the wreckage by rescuers who had tirelessly scoured the site for any signs of life. Her survival, discovered 14 hours after the official end of rescue operations, sparked immense relief and hope among the people. As the last few survivors were getting pulled out from the wreckage, public outcry started to subside, and everyone's focus shifted to the cause of the incident. Initially, the Chinese government claimed that a lightning strike during the storm that day had caused the crash. However, this explanation was met with widespread skepticism, particularly from the grieving families who had lost their loved ones in the disaster. Many felt that a single lightning strike should not have been enough to bring down such a sophisticated and supposedly fail-safe system. Furthermore, the lack of transparency and the rapid cleanup of the site led to suspicions of a potential cover-up or deeper underlying issues within the railway system's safety protocols and maintenance practices. As the days turned to weeks, it became clear that the situation was far more complex than a simple act of nature, and experts would soon find out that the so-called lightning strike was just the tip of the iceberg. Chinese officials first explained that the lightning strike had caused a power outage on Train D301, causing it to stop on the tracks. However, they could not answer another crucial question. Why did the oncoming D301 train, traveling at high speeds, fail to detect the stationary train ahead? This question also confused many experts who were involved in the investigation. They believed that while the lightning strike triggered the deadly crash, there must have been something else that may have contributed to the disaster. When a team of experts examined the blueprints and logs from the trains involved, as well as the operating system behind China's high-speed rail network, they uncovered something the officials might have overlooked or deliberately ignored, something that could potentially change the course of the investigation. On that fateful day, the CTCS-2, which was regarded as state-of-the-art technology, had failed to alert the oncoming train about the presence of a stationary train just ahead of its track. In our previous episode, we explained the role of the CTS-2 in managing China's massive high-speed railway network. It is a sophisticated system of signals and sensors that sends messages to train drivers and control centers about the latest updates from the rail tracks, providing them with crucial information while the trains zip across the country at high speeds. The system also featured multiple safety mechanisms to prevent any disasters, such as two trains colliding on the same track. However, like many modern innovations, it was extremely vulnerable to natural forces, such as lightning and thunderstorms. During the early evening of July 23rd, intense rains, thunderstorms, and lightning prevailed over Wenzhou city. The two ill-fated trains, D301 and D301, had not pulled into the station yet. It was approximately 7:30 p.m., and no high-speed trains were being monitored from the Wenzhou North Railway Station. But unbeknownst to the officers stationed at its control center, one of their signal assemblies that formed part of the CTCS-2 system had just been struck by lightning. Its fuse blew out, and the device immediately went down, cutting off the message line between trains and the control center. A few kilometers south of Wenzhou North Railway Station, lightning storms also hit a track circuit device of the CTCS-2, causing it to malfunction and sending a red zone warning to the entire control system of China's high-speed rail. An officer at the control center of Wenzhou spotted the ominous red zone warning flashing on his screen. His heart raced as he informed the main dispatch center in Shanghai of the issue and alerted the technicians at Wenzhou South, who quickly scrambled to fix the error. But due to the bad weather, their efforts proved futile. Roughly 20 minutes later, Train D301 from Hangzhou City arrived at Wenzhou North Railway Station. When the train came to a stop, the doors opened, and passengers were flowing in and out. Meanwhile, in Shanghai, the dispatch center noticed that the red zone warning had appeared on their screens, signaling a system failure. Realizing the urgency of the situation, the control center in Shanghai swiftly issued an urgent alert to Wenzhou North and Wenzhou South stations, instructing them to switch from automatic to manual train dispatching immediately. They also sent an urgent message to the driver of the D301 waiting for clearance to depart from Wenzhou North. Dispatchers told the driver about the problem ahead and that the automatic train protection, or ATP system, would stop the train upon arrival at the area. To proceed on its journey, they instructed him to switch to manual control and drive at a maximum speed of 20 kilometers per hour. By 8:12 p.m., another bullet train arrived at Wenzhou North. It was Train D301, carrying over 600 passengers from the capital Beijing. Then, 2 minutes later, at 8:14 p.m., Train D301 finally departed, cautiously heading towards the trouble block section ahead. The train from Hangzhou City arrived at the red zone around 8:21 p.m., and as the control center in Shanghai had informed the driver, the train came to a stop as the ATP system had been activated. Following the instructions relayed to him earlier, the driver attempted to switch to manual control to restart the train, but failed. This went on 3 times, but each attempt only ended in frustration, as the damaged signal assembly practically severed message lines between control centers and trains in Wenzhou at that time. Out of options, the driver tried to contact the dispatch center in Shanghai, but each time he tried to make contact, the line wouldn't go through. On the other hand, the Wenzhou control center tried to reach the driver of Train D301 thrice, but their efforts were also in vain. Meanwhile, the dispatch center in Shanghai instructed Train D301 to leave Wenzhou North and proceed to Wenzhou South, unaware that the D301 was stranded on the same line. When the driver looked at his screen, the signal was green, but it should have been red, as the other high-speed train that departed earlier was stationary on the same track. Several minutes later, Wenzhou's control center finally reached the driver of Train D301, and they learned that the train had come to a stop. At the same time, the other bullet train had already left Wenzhou north and was barreling down the same track. Panic immediately set in at the control center as the officers knew what was coming. In a desperate bid to avert disaster, they immediately contacted the driver of the oncoming train, who was now dangerously close to the stranded Train D301. The driver of D301 looked up from his screen and stared through his window. Sure enough, the rear end of another bullet train came into view. He hurriedly applied the brakes, but stopping a train that was already traveling at around 100 kilometers per hour was nearly impossible. In the aftermath of the accident, the driver of the crashed train was hailed as a hero because his actions had prevented the disaster from becoming even worse. When he realized that they were going to crash into the rear of another train, he immediately applied the brakes. Thinking of his passengers' safety, he gripped the brake handle so tightly that upon impact, the handle pierced his chest, killing him in the process. It's been said that without his brave actions, at least one more train car would have derailed, likely increasing the death toll. His sacrifice, though heartbreaking, prevented an even greater tragedy. As the investigation of the incident unfolded, it became clear that the collision was caused by a combination of a lightning strike, failures in the signal system, and human error. The CTCS-2, which was designed to be fail-safe and known for its reliability, had failed catastrophically. But the investigation didn't stop there. Further scrutiny uncovered a more troubling factor. When the Chinese government released its official report on the Wenzhou train collision to the public in December 2011, 5 months after the tragedy, it revealed that the country's ambitious plans for rapid progress and economic growth came at a deadly cost. Because China had invested billions of dollars into expanding its high-speed railway network, construction was completed in just a few years. However, this rapid progress came at a cost. Officials and contractors engaged in graft and corruption, skipping or bypassing crucial inspections to expedite the construction process. The rush to finish the projects had overshadowed most of the essential safety measures. The report also pointed out that regulators had not conducted sufficient tests on the CTCS-2 system before installing it on high-speed rail tracks. If these tests had been done, the system's weaknesses could have been identified, possibly preventing the disaster. As a consequence, the Chinese government charged 54 officials with taking kickbacks and bypassing safety regulations to fast-track the construction of the high-speed rail network. However, it is not known if any of these officials served jail time. The 2011 Wenzhou train collision remains one of the darkest chapters in China's high-speed rail history. The victims were fathers, mothers, children, and friends, each with their own stories and dreams that had abruptly ended. In the wake of the tragedy, the Chinese government moved swiftly to implement changes. New safety measures were introduced, and significant improvements were made on existing ones, including the CTCS-2 system. They overhauled the railway signal systems, upgraded communication channels, and held rigorous training programs for railway staff. Enhanced safety measures, including improved automatic train protection systems and lightning protection, were added to the CTCS-2 system, alongside regular safety audits and investigation protocols. New safety standards and emergency response plans were also established, with a focus on public engagement to rebuild trust in the high-speed rail network. These changes were essential, but unfortunately, they came too late for the victims of the collision. Mass Murders is a one-up media original. A quick word on our reenactments and dramatizations. While we can't know exactly what they say, think or feel at the moment, it is all based on research. Mass Murders is produced by Ethan Sam. Our executive producer is Guang Jin. Story writing and research by M. Audio engineering by Vung An and Ethan Sam. Narrated by Jason. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.